When Japan entered World War II, it ruled the skies. Its Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter was the deadliest aircraft in the Pacific, lightweight, agile, and unmatched in dogfights. American and British pilots were stunned by its turning speed and climb rate. In the first 6 months of the war, the Zero destroyed Allied air forces from the Philippines to Singapore. It could twist through the clouds like smoke, its 20mm cannons shredding anything that got too close. Pilots who survived encounters described it as a ghost with wings. In the months after Pearl Harbor, Japanese pilots became legends. They flew circles around Allied planes like the outdated F4F Wildcats and P-40s. For a while it seemed nothing could stop them. At airfields across the Pacific, American mechanics and engineers pored over wrecked Zeros, desperate to understand how such a fragile-looking plane could dominate the sky. It wasn't just a fighter, it was a symbol. To Japan it represented invincibility. To America, it was a riddle that had to be solved. But in the factories back home, behind closed doors, the US Navy had already started designing a weapon specifically to destroy the Zero, a machine born not from elegance, but from necessity. The US Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics issued the challenge in 1942. Build a new carrier fighter that could destroy the Zero at every altitude. It had to be faster, tougher, and climb higher, and it had to be ready yesterday. The task fell to Grumman Aircraft Engineering, led by Leroy Grumman, a man known for building rugged, reliable machines. He gathered his best minds and asked one question: how do we beat perfection? The answer: don't play the Zero's game. The Japanese fighter was light and nimble because it sacrificed armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and structural strength. The Americans decided to go the opposite direction, build a brawler, a tank with wings. The result was the F6F Hellcat, a beast of steel and horsepower. It wasn't sleek, but it was deadly. Powered by a massive 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, it could climb out of trouble and dive at terrifying speed. It could absorb punishment that would rip a Zero in half and still bring its pilot home. By June 1942, prototypes were ready. Test pilots took them up, comparing performance with captured Zeros. The results were stunning. The Hellcat outdived, outclimbed, and outsurvived the Zero, and it wasn't even in full production yet. The US Navy had just found its answer. The F6F Hellcat made its combat debut in August 1943 over the Pacific island of Marcus. It wasn't a fair fight. American pilots reported Zeros diving down on them, confident and aggressive as always. But the Hellcat could take hits the Zero couldn't. Dream of surviving. The Americans throttled up, pulled into climbs the Japanese couldn't follow, and then rolled down to strike from above, tactics designed specifically for this plane. The first kills came quickly. Within weeks, Hellcats were scoring victory after victory. At Bougainville, a single US squadron shot down 30 enemy planes in one day. One pilot radioed simply, "These cats have claws." The tide in the Pacific began to shift. For the first time, American pilots didn't fear the Zero, they hunted it. Japanese flyers, once proud and confident, began to sense something terrifying. The enemy had built a machine that neutralized every strength they had, and worse, America could build them faster than Japan could replace its losses. By 1944, the F6F Hellcat dominated the Pacific. It didn't just win, it overwhelmed. Everywhere it went, American pilots racked up astonishing kill counts. Of the 18,000 Hellcats produced, they destroyed over 5,200 Japanese aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter of the war. Pilots like David McCampbell, the Navy's top ace, shot down 9 planes in a single mission. Another, Eugene Valencia, became famous for saying, "The Hellcat makes you feel like you're the hunter, never the hunted." The Hellcat's cockpit was spacious, its controls smooth and forgiving. It could be flown by rookies and veterans alike. Its wide landing gear made carrier takeoffs safe and easy, a luxury the Zero could never match. The US Navy called it the Ace Maker, and that's exactly what it became. The Hellcat wasn't elegant, but it was unstoppable. As the Hellcat swept across the Pacific, Japanese command realized the unthinkable. Their legendary Zero was obsolete. They scrambled to develop new fighters, the N-1K Shiden and Kai-84 Hayate, but Japan's industry was collapsing under bombing raids. Fuel was scarce, pilots were inexperienced, and parts were poor quality. Meanwhile, American carriers churned out fully armed Hellcats by the hundreds every month. Desperation led to tragedy. The Japanese began launching kamikaze attacks, sending pilots to crash their planes into U.S. ships. The Hellcats were among the first line of defense, intercepting and destroying suicide aircraft before they could reach the fleet. The battle that once defined Japan's pride had turned into one of survival. The Zero, once a symbol of dominance, was now a relic, outmatched by an American fighter that embodied everything Japan had dismissed: armor, durability, and brute force. The Hellcat's secret wasn't just its engine or firepower, it was how it was built. Grumman engineers made every part modular. Wings, landing gear, even the fuselage could be replaced at sea. Damaged planes were repaired on deck and flying. Again within days, this meant the U.S. Navy could keep its air wings fully operational across thousands of miles of ocean, a feat Japan could never match. The Hellcat's 50-caliber guns were mounted close together for precision. Its bulletproof glass and armored cockpit kept pilots alive through hits that would have killed them in any other plane. It was the perfect marriage of power and practicality, born not in luxury, but in urgency. And every time a Japanese pilot tried to dogfight it, they learned the same lesson. The Hellcat didn't need to outturn you, it just needed one burst. By mid-1944, the Pacific skies no longer belonged to Japan. In the Battle of the Philippine Sea, more than 300 Japanese aircraft launched against the U.S. fleet, and the Hellcats tore them apart. The battle became known as the Great Marianas. Turkey Shoot. Out of 373 Japanese planes, over 250 were destroyed. American losses, just 29. Hellcats hunted in groups, diving through enemy formations with ruthless precision. Japanese pilots, many of them barely trained, never stood a chance. The legend of the Zero ended that day. For the first time, the U.S. Navy had complete control of the sky. From that moment on, Japan would never again threaten the Pacific, and it was all thanks to a plane they once laughed at. When the war ended in 1945, the F6F Hellcat had become one of history's most successful fighters. Its kill ratio, an astonishing 19-1, remains unmatched. It outlasted its rivals, protected thousands of bomber crews, and turned the tide of the Pacific. But its story is more than just engineering. It's a lesson in humility, a reminder that arrogance is a weapon's greatest weakness. Japan's Zero was fast and beautiful, but fragile. America's Hellcat was heavy and blunt, but it could take punishment, adapt, and keep flying. Today, restored Hellcats still thunder across airshows, their massive engines echoing across the sky like distant applause. For every veteran who once saw that twin-bladed monster rise from a carrier deck, it remains more than metal. It's the sound of survival. The plane Japan laughed at became its worst nightmare,